Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts.
We're a traveling couple and digital nomads taking you on our adventures as we explore locations, destinations, and careers.
Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome back to the World Wanderers. We are very excited that you are here with us today. And as it's the end of the year, it's time for us to do our year in review episode.
Yeah, and we've been a little bit absent over the last, month and a half. So maybe we can start by addressing that. I think the last episode we put out was kind of the end of October. It was right before we flew to Argentina. And we're going to tell you more about Argentina a little bit in this episode. And we'll definitely in the new year have some Argentina specific episodes. But we had big plans of arriving to Argentina and doing a recording about how it went traveling a long haul flight. Because Argentina is pretty south, my friends. I'm sure you know if you look on a map, but it's pretty south from Mexico where we live. And so it was a pretty long flight. And at this point, we're traveling with a full-on toddler. Our daughter is almost 2 at this point, and she's pretty big to be sharing a seat with us. So we were going to talk about, preparing for that flight, because that is, a super different preparation from even what we did for Japan just a couple of months ago. And then we both got struck with terrible colds, not super, super sick, but definitely were not able to record podcast episodes. And so, yeah, we've just not done the podcast for 6 weeks. So here we are doing a year in review. We're going to wrap it up. And then, like I said, we'll kick off the new year with a little recap on Argentina, and we're slowly getting some photos out on social media. So eventually you will hear all about our trip, but we'll give you at least the high level overview of it here and now. So we're happy to be back after a little bit of a, unintentional break that we took.
Yeah, I think this is probably something we'll talk a bit more about, future of the podcast, kind of what we want to look at and think about in the next year. But yeah, this feeling of sometimes when you're doing a project like this, for us, we really love making the podcast, talking about our travels. We love interacting with everybody who listens and hearing about your trips and hearing if things have been of value to you guys. But sometimes it feels like a lot of work. And then you're like, wait a second, I'm my own boss here. So maybe we'll just take a break. But if you are someone who's weekly listening to the podcast or every other week when they come out and is bummed, let us know. And that's always good information to have. But let's start by kind of going through travel. So this year, we definitely hit the road again. I think it was fall 2022. The world was returning to normal.
Lou was getting a little bit bigger. We were feeling a little bit more stable in parenthood.
And also this impending, we're going to have to buy 3 tickets in February of 2024. All kind of combined to give us some inspiration. And I think the first thing might have been, I don't know if it was summer, but back in 2022, we're fuck it, let's buy tickets to Colombia. And then it really kicked off a big year of travel for us. So we went to country-wise, Panama, Colombia, the US, Japan, Argentina, brief stopovers in Chile, and then Canada as well. So actually, no new countries for us, but a lot of countries, some new places, and a lot of great adventures. Also, lots of cool stuff in Mexico. And I think kind of also experiencing an evolution of kind of setting ourselves up with a home base and how that was able to bring lots of friends to where we were. Why don't we start things off a little bit in chronological order with Panama and Colombia and that trip?
Yeah, for sure. And maybe just since you said home base, we can just kind of set the scene a little bit. So if you guys kind of have been listening along, then obviously we landed in Querétaro, Mexico to have our baby girl at the end of 2021. So we've been here for about 2 years now. And we just rented an Airbnb for 6-7 months. We figured we'll spend my 3rd trimester and the first kind of 3 months of her life here. And we just really liked the city, and we also liked being really stable. So we ended up signing a lease on a house. It was a bit nerve-wracking for us at first. Anyone out there who's doing nomad life or has done nomad life can probably understand the stress that comes with this idea of signing a 1-year lease when you haven't done that in so many years. And we hadn't done that in so many years. But I think it's one of the best decisions we've made in the last couple of years, because it gave us this stability, this ability to settle, this ability to focus on both work and being parents, which is, two exhausting things in and of themselves. But because we have affordable living and a great quality of life here, we've also been able to strike a balance of being able to travel while keeping this home base. And I think that that's been one of the best balances that we've been able to strike in the last couple of years. Like, I have really, really loved having a home base and then also being able to travel. And I feel like it's a real blessing to be able to do that, especially in 2023 when costs and inflation are at a kind of all-time high.
Yeah. And so the first trip we did was right at the start of the year, January 5th. We were in the midst of a kind of a cold snap here.
Cold snap, quote unquote. Not a Canadian cold snap. Any Northern Americans or Canadians listening, not that kind of cold snap. But it is chilly here, especially because there's no central heating in the homes.
Yeah, and I think we both had a bit of like death cough, where it was like we just had these coughs we couldn't get rid of. And we flew back to Panama. We've talked about it on the podcast, but yeah, had a chance to reacquaint ourselves a little bit with Panama on a stopover before heading to Colombia. What are your kind of, now that we're almost 12 months away from it, like recollections, thoughts on that first adventure?
Yeah, it was fun because we were out for a walk yesterday and we were just reflecting on the travels this year and kind of what we learned. And one of the things that I was reflecting on is that I really loved that we did stop over in Panama. We talked about this in our Panama episode, but we got a layover via Copa. Copa's doing, I think they're still doing it, these like couple day layovers. You can schedule one day or, a week or whatever you want in Panama City. I think they're really trying to, get tourism in there, get people to get out of the airport and actually experience the city. And so we took advantage of that flying from Mexico City to Medellin, I believe it was. And we spent about 3 days there. We hadn't been there since we left in a hurry from the pandemic. And one of the things I think was really great is that we booked a nice Airbnb right in Casco Viejo, which is the old town there, very close to a lot of the restaurants that we really liked and close to coffee shops we like, in an area that's super beautiful, gave us really easy access to one of our favorite walking paths. And we just enjoyed the time that we had there. It was just a couple of days. It was super hot. And I think that this was kind of the first, this was the first trip other than being in Canada for a couple of weeks and then also going to the US where we traveled with Lou. And so we were kind of just feeling out like, what is it like to travel while you're working, while I'm working during naps, while like coordinating her schedule, figuring out transportation with a kid that needs a car seat, all that type of stuff. So I feel like it was kind of like the first time of dipping our feet into that new lifestyle, this new lifestyle that we travel with. And I feel like we just had a great setup there. And I feel like it was just like a really fun, it was like only 3 days, but I feel like it was just like a really fun trip.
Yeah. And then Colombia was really cool as well. I think there's definitely highlights like visiting Gotape and also getting to spend kind of an offline weekend in Santa Elena. I think looking back for me, that kind of time frame and one of the big lessons we learned there, that was like really our first time out with Lou trying to do this work and travel thing, was like, one, the importance of neighborhood and being like close to things you want to do because you're going to be kind of heading back for naps. At that point, I think Lou was she still napping twice?
Yeah, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. So we were kind of like morning activity back for her nap, lunch activity back for her nap, evening activity back for her bedtime. I feel like it was a little bit of a scramble to go like anywhere further than like 20 minutes.
And we ended up staying in a decently nice apartment. It was relatively expensive compared to like some of the other options, but very small. And I think that's one of the big takeaways for me from that was like just the importance, if we're going to be doing this as a family, trying to work, of like the actual space that you're staying in does kind of matter more now, I think, than it did when it was just us, where we could be like, book a cheap Airbnb and it's like, we're just going to sleep here and we're going to work in cafes and be out all day. So
or it's like take a call from the bathroom and it really doesn't matter. It's like how we set up her space matters a lot more.
Yeah. And two, also just like the amount of space. Cause like you said, we stayed at some places in the past where it was like, oh, I'll teach like English class from the closet, from the bathroom. And now it's like Lou's sleeping in one room. And so if you're in like a well, a studio obviously is problematic, but like there's a balcony space and a bedroom space and a main living space, but places where we can do calls and stuff. But yeah, overall, I think for me, that was a really cool trip. It's interesting because one of the things that's awesome about Querétaro is that it has really great weather, but there definitely are some times where you get kind of tired of being here. And so I think taking that January trip was really nice to kind of just like escape the kind of colder, grayer time. And it was like, hey, we did Christmas and then kind of got to like a nice warm place.
Yeah, for sure. It was actually really interesting. You know, it's obviously December at the time of recording. We're kind of getting into this like gray, colder, surprisingly rainy this season time. We've got our space heaters running in our house. I know that sounds ridiculous because we're in Mexico, but hear us out. It is chilly here. And one of my friends was saying, she's new here, and she was saying, I don't know how I'm going to manage this like freezing cold house through January. And I was thinking, what was January like last year? Like, what did we do? And I was
No
like,
idea.
oh, right.
It was hot. It was sunny.
We went to Panama, where it was like extremely hot. And then we went to Colombia. And if anyone hasn't listened to our Colombia episodes, we spent the majority of our time in Medellin. And El Poblado is kind of like, you know, the popular place where people talk about if you're either a backpacker or a nomad, the place to stay or around that area. We'd had a friend who'd been, you know, a couple of months before us who had stayed in that area, and we ended up renting an apartment building in the same location as him. And I think, you know, there's nothing wrong with where we stayed. I just think we're in a different chapter of life. And so we got there and I was kind of like, this is not really like a family-friendly vibe. This is not really like the ideal space for us. And so it wasn't bad, but I think it was just a good learning experience. Like the last time we went to Medellin was in 2014. We were baby backpackers. We were staying in hostels, you know, very, very, very different life chapter than what we're in right now. And I think we just have worked in so many places, like you said, Ryan, where it's like we just use a closet or we use a bathroom to like, teach an English class or take a call or whatever. And I think we just didn't know what we needed out of a space. And so we booked this 1-bedroom apartment, which granted definitely used like a fisheye lens in their photos because it was quite a bit smaller than what it seemed to be. And it had, 1.5 bath, which thankfully it had a bathroom outside of the bedroom. And then it had a small kitchen, a small living room, a patio, good sized bedroom. And the bedroom did have a desk, but the problem is that we had a small infant who was less than a year who napped, 4 hours a day, maybe 5 hours a day. And so if we ever had calls at the same time, it's like one of us has to use the bathroom or the patio, stuff like that. And so I think we just had a really good learning experience with that about how to plan a bit better. And I know we'll talk about this with Japan. I think we were talking about this yesterday. We planned so much better for that trip, but maybe let's not skip ahead. But yeah, Colombia was, all that to say is like, we really enjoyed Colombia. The food was amazing. It was so fun to be back there. It was so fun to be back to Medellin after 9 years of not being there. And especially we had a trip planned in 2020 that was 10 days after the pandemic kind of was fully declared, that obviously got canceled. So it was fun to kind of take that trip.
Yeah, definitely fun to be back on the road again, be somewhere new. And I think for me, one thing that kind of stands back, which is kind of fond feelings about Panama too. I feel like I'd like to go back again and spend a stretch there, but I kind of got on back and then doing a bit more kind of bigger family travel. We went somewhere with your parents this February. We went to Puerto Vallarta.
Yeah. So we went there to spend, they wanted to come down for Lou's first birthday, which is in February. And my birthday is also in February, very close to hers. And so we kind of booked a trip to do that. I kind of said they'd come down here in December. It's like, why don't we go somewhere warm? Why? I mean, it's obviously significantly warmer in Querétaro than it is in Alberta, Canada. But I'm like, why don't we go to the beach? We would love to have a beach trip. And it'd be really fun for us to just do that. We can take Lou to PV for the first time. That's a place that we really love. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, you guys will hear when we give our update, we've got a lot more travel with our families happening now that we have a child. This wasn't really something that we've been doing in the last couple of years. Our parents didn't really come to visit us in Mexico. We didn't really plan trips with them. And it's been fun to kind of have this, I guess, new chapter of travel added in. And we had a really, really good time. It was like a different vibe than what we're used to in PV because we stayed at more of like a resort hotel thing, not all inclusive, but like, yeah, resort hotel, which we've never really done there. But it was still really fun. We got to go to some of our favorite restaurants and, walk on the Malecon and go to the beach. It was, great trip.
Yeah, and we also drove out there. So we spent 2 nights in Guadalajara, one on the way out, one on the way back. And yeah, it was just cool to see lots of stuff we hadn't seen before, driving from here to Guadalajara and then Guadalajara to PV. I feel like I saw someone's, it was like an Instagram story, someone on a big road trip. And I was thinking like, it's been a while since we've had a big road trip and kind of enjoy those. But so that was cool for that reason. And then that got us ready for like our biggest trip of the year, which was to Japan, which we've talked a lot about on the podcast, but kind of outside of the stuff we talked about in kind of previous episodes. What do you think kind of looking back on that Japan trip in April?
Oh my gosh, Japan was for sure a highlight of this whole year. I feel like this was probably my favorite trip that we did this year. I just feel like we went at a good time of year. We had friends there at the same time as us, which was so fun. We planned really well in terms of like when you were working, when we weren't. I feel like we went to great places. Lou was a really fun age for it. I mean, Japan is amazing. We did go on and on for like 4 episodes about how much we love Japan, but I just feel like Japan is a really great country to travel with probably any age children, but particularly a small child. I felt like it was it's so safe. There's so many services for children. Like the public transit is amazing. It's super safe. The food's great. Like I just feel like there was not really anything bad about that trip, honestly. Like it was just amazing. Like, and I think we're already like dreaming of going back.
Yeah, I think for me, we've been watching the Ramit Sethi show on Netflix, and where they talk about kind of living a rich life and how you spend your money, that type of thing. And for me, looking back on Japan, I was like, this is exactly like the type of travel I want to be doing. And so, yeah, so much cool stuff there. But it's also just a place where it's like really fun to just be. Like I think looking back at Colombia, maybe that's a little bit of a difference where I felt like the things we did in Colombia, like when we had kind of during the weeks trying to work, and then on the weekend went to Cotape, went to Santa Elena,
went to the national park,
and like definitely had some good meals and stuff. But like just kind of like the being there part of it was like fine. But I was also kind of like, I kind of miss being at home. Just like the being there part of being in Japan is like, I find it's kind of like, you're like, oh, we're going to 7-Eleven. What's going on here? I'm taking a train. Like there's so many like cool, just like things about just like being there, walking around.
Well, the culture is so different, right? But it's also like different in a way that's not like totally uncomfortable because it's safe, because people are so kind, because people are very patient. Like I think it's just a really good cultural immersion experience in a way that, you just don't get in a lot of other countries, or a lot of other countries that we've experienced. And I also think obviously Colombia and Mexico have, significant cultural differences and significant differences in food, but it's not as different to go from Mexico to Colombia as it is from Mexico to Japan. And obviously everyone knows with the pandemic, it's like we just didn't travel very much over the course of 2020 to basically 2023. And obviously we could have traveled earlier, but I was pregnant, we had a baby, all the things. So I feel like it was the first, I don't feel like I know, it was the first trip we took since we were in Asia in 2017, where we were in a country that wasn't English or Spanish speaking. And that was weird for us. And it's like, we kind of travel full time, but it's been 6 years since we've been in a country that doesn't speak English or Spanish. Like that's kind of crazy. We've really been nestled in this little corner of the world for a number of years now. And that's been amazing for so many reasons. But I think it was just so good to get out of our comfort zone in a place that is so different and so strange, but also like so safe and so comfortable in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I think looking back for me, some of the highlights are just like hanging out in parks, taking trains, going to like the saunas and the hot baths. Why am I forgetting the word for what they call that?
Hot springs?
Onsen.
Onsen.
So yeah, that part of it also worked out really well. I feel really, really lucky kind of the way I've got work set up right now to have been able to, go to the other side of the world and keep working. So that was really cool. And I think having that second experience in Japan, we went to some places we'd been before, some places we haven't been. And it just feels like there's so many layers to it of places I want to go, the places we've been. I want to spend more time in different areas of Tokyo. So definitely on my radar for wanting to go back again relatively soon. And so we
2024.
Yeah, did the long flights. The long flights pretty solid. It'll be interesting kind of making the transition now from us having 2 seats to us going to 3 seats and our kind of business class lifestyle going back to an economy lifestyle if we were doing those long flights again. But came back from Japan and then kind of turned right around in Mexico and went to Austin for a little bit. Anything kind of want to say about Austin?
I think it was just fun it's always fun to go to the US for us. We've got great friends there that we get to catch up with. I feel like we've got some favorite food stops. And I just think Austin's a really fun city. If you guys haven't been, I feel like I would definitely recommend it. I feel like, it's expensive, but I think that there's just a lot of cool stuff to do. And obviously we don't do a lot of the nightlife stuff anymore, which Austin has great nightlife and stuff to do, but I think there's still tons of stuff to do, even if you have, small kids.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Austin, this is what would it be? 1, 2, maybe the 5th time we've been to Austin.
Yeah, we've been to Austin a bunch now.
And so I feel like Austin, one, has tons of cool people in it. We've got good friends there. And then also just, it seems tons of cool people, tons of interesting community happening in Austin. Seems like there's tons of cool stuff in Austin. There's great restaurants, some beautiful parks, lots of things to do outside of the city, lots of things to do inside of the city, kind of growing, bustling city. There's 2 things that kind of, as we have gone back and kind of got more familiar with the city, kind of I noticed myself disliking more is one, just how far everything is apart. It really is a car city.
I think this is so many major cities in America though.
Yeah, but it's there's lots of cool stuff in Austin, but a lot of it's quite spread out and there's no, I think East Austin seems cool and there's maybe a bit more condensed stuff, but the other factor is just the homelessness and kind of delinquency on the streets kind of gives you the impression that it's you don't really want to walk around, kind of the exact opposite of a Japan situation.
I think maybe we noticed it so much more. We literally had one night in Mexico City before we went to Austin. And I feel like it's just a very different vibe from Japan.
Yeah. So I think there's things for me now where I'm noticing myself being less excited about the idea of being there. I think for living, it would be cool because of that community aspect, but I definitely notice that kind of evolution with it for me.
I think something, can I add on to that? Because I think,
of course.
Because I think with cities that are not super walkable or that don't have, nice, good public transit, when you have a small child that's in a car seat, it makes Ubering around extremely difficult. And obviously in Mexico, or maybe not obviously, but in Mexico and a lot of Latin America, you can just go rogue and hold your child. This is not the option that we choose 99% of the time. But you can do it. In the US, that's in Canada too, it's very illegal. So it makes Ubering basically a non-option for us unless we're going to transport a car seat with us everywhere we go. And as Lou has gotten bigger, she doesn't just have an infant car seat that we can just pop in and out that's super lightweight. She's, a toddler, she's walking. It just makes it a bit more challenging. So when you go to a city like Austin, it's we basically have to rent a car with a car seat in order for us to be able to go places. So it makes cities that aren't walkable without good public transit or comfortable public transit a little bit more challenging for us. Being in Japan was so easy because their public transit is super nice, it's affordable, it's super easy to get around, it's super child friendly, it's safe. There's all the things that make it a little easier. And, we have no issues renting a car, but it's just something you consider when you're traveling because it's a huge added expense. It's not just as easy for us these days to just oh, we're going to go for dinner. Let's just grab an Uber for 15 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, for me, I don't necessarily think it's kind of a question of public transit. I think it's more just the structural part of the city where it's like things are really far apart. And the way the city is, like when you do, even when like having the rental car, jumping in the car, it's like not the most pleasant driving. And the other part of it is like when you do get out and you're like, hey, I'm going to walk to this thing. It's like 15 minutes from here. Like there's no sidewalks. There's sketchy things happening around. And I think there's really cool spaces, but the spaces are all disconnected. It seems like, right? There's like, oh, this cool like food truck beer garden thing. And there's like this cool park space, but it's all separated and it all requires driving on the interstate. So any final thoughts on Austin?
All that to say, we love Austin, but not like our top travel experience, I think. We like it for some reasons, but maybe not others.
Yeah. And in between May and kind of the middle of summer, we were fairly stable here. I think one of the really cool things about kind of planting our flag here has been when you're kind of more sturdy in one spot, other people come to visit you. So especially through like the first half of this year, I feel like had lots of travel friends here and around Querétaro.
Yeah, absolutely. We had your family down here, which I guess doesn't count as travel friends. We had our friends Mitko and Sarah, who have been on the podcast. They were actually on the show this year. Come and visit. Sasha and Rachel, who you guys know from the show. They were down here to visit, which was really nice to see them. They hadn't met Lou before. And then we also had our friend Vina, who we met in Panama, and then she stayed in Panama and then went back to New Zealand and then onwards to Australia. She was actually in Mexico. So really fun to catch up with her after, I guess, like 3 years of not seeing each other. So we had a really good stretch kind of this spring where we got to see some good friends and catch up with family, which was really nice. And I think, like you said, that is one of the benefits, I think, of having a home base is like people know you're there so they can plan trips well in advance. And it's not like, where are you going to be in 6 months? And we're like, oh, we don't know, maybe here, maybe here. So I feel like that was really cool to like show some people around. We went to San Miguel with Vina, which was really fun. It's always fun to like get out of the city and show people kind of the surrounding area. So yeah, definitely enjoyed that aspect of things. And also, I think if you've kind of following along with this timeline, it's like we had these kind of breaks in between our kind of bigger trips, which was really nice. So we had a couple months, I guess, mid-May to mid-July when we were just here. We did a couple of other Mexico-related trips, but I think we'll just combine that at the end. We can share a few of the new places that we explored before we headed to Canada, where we spent 5 weeks, which was actually like a pretty long trip.
Yeah, it's the longest we've been there since 2020. And yeah, overall, good times in Canada. Anything kind of stand out for you looking back on it?
I mean, we just had some really like fun stuff. We had a really fun friends weekend with some of my best girlfriends. We had like a really balanced time between where your parents live, where my parents live. We just got to catch up with lots of friends. We ate lots of like our favorite Canadian foods, drank lots of Caesars, drank lots of good wine. We ate a lot of wings, nachos. We've kind of figured out that when we go back to Canada, we sort of like pub food. Is that the case? Like good burgers, good chicken wings, good nachos. I do feel like one thing that does stand out to me outside of just like really enjoying some family and friend time was just inflation is hit hard in Canada. Canada is expensive these days. Like the prices, I felt this in Austin too, but it's like going to Austin, I expect to have some sticker shock coming from Mexico. Canada, I feel like has always felt a little less to me. And I feel like this year I was like, whoa, especially going to the grocery store. It's just so expensive these days.
Yeah, definitely. Something about this trip that was interesting. Normally we like drive in between BC and Alberta, and we don't have a car there anymore. So we flew, which I noticed I got myself kind of missing, like the road trip part of being in Canada and driving around. But good experiences flying, and then yeah, good times with friends. Always nice to spend time with family. And I think this year too was like the first time we were home last summer, but Lou was kind of a bit more baby mode a year ago. And so this summer to kind of see her like interact with things, like have her kind of exploring the place I grew up and going to like the park I would go when I was a kid. It was just kind of a cool feeling.
Yeah, for sure. Like there's peach trees on your parents' property, and it was really fun to see her get into a routine of like going out every morning with your mom, like her instigating like, she can't say yet, like, let's go pick a peach, but her signaling like, okay, it's time to go pick a peach. And she goes out and she has like a juicy peach right from the tree, which I'm sure was like a part of your childhood, like every summer eating peaches as they were ripe or going to pick strawberries with your dad. And we got to take her to my parents' cabin and take her out on the boat, which is like, we've had a boat since I was a kid. And that's somewhere that, I basically spent my whole summers as a kid. So I think it's really fun to see her interacting. Like you said, like the difference between 6 months and 18 months is like huge. And so even having her, like we introduced her to our friends last year and our friends' kids, but her being able to like play with them and run around and start to build relationships with her grandparents and start to interact with, Canada, which is not where we're living right now, but it's like, she's a Canadian citizen. She's got a Canadian passport. She's obviously got Canadian heritage through us. It's like really fun to see her kind of start to develop that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Any final notes on Canada?
I think just great trip, and I'm excited to go back again next year.
Yeah, I think one thing I'm thinking about with it is like there's these other places I'd like to go in Canada, and it's kind of a pickle. I think lots of like digital nomads experience this where it's like you kind of want to like, oh, there's places I'd like to go in my home country, but it doesn't really like work out to go there a lot of the time.
Because you live out of the country for so much of the year.
And
right?
especially somewhere like Canada where it's like gigantic. So, if you're like, oh, I want to go visit like PEI and then fly like 5 hours back to where my parents are. But yeah, maybe trying to figure out a way to go somewhere else in Canada in the future.
I think we also get hit with like, there's a lot of, this is probably why we haven't been to Europe in like nearing on a decade for both of us, is because, I guess spring and fall are both beautiful times for Europe. So we could certainly do that. But I feel like summer is such a popular time to go to Europe. But for us, as we've lived out of the country, it's been like all of our summers are just going back to Canada because that's the most ideal time to go. So yeah, I think we're definitely playing around with like, do we go at a different time of year? Do we want to introduce Lou to proper winter, get her some snow? Do we want to do that? What do we kind of do? But I do really love this, like going back to Canada for at least part of the summer. And we were talking about this before, like, I thought you were going to say when you're like, could we explore somewhere that you wanted to go up to the Yukon, which I know has been on our list too. But yeah, the Atlantic provinces is somewhere I've never been. You haven't been since you were like a teenager. Like would love to get out there and explore kind of more of our home country. But yeah, just a first world problem we're experiencing over here.
Yeah, definitely. I think the other thing that we noticed and maybe learned this trip is we kind of like to do like at least a little bit of like our own thing when we're home. Like in the past, we've like gone to different cities in the mountains and things. And just traveling, especially in the summer in Canada, prices have gotten so crazy. Like the idea of like, hey, we're going to spend a couple of nights in Banff in July is like, one, it's like actually difficult to make a hotel reservation. And two, when you have the opportunity to, prices are so crazy. So I'm trying to like think of like what makes sense timeline wise to maybe not go at peak times. But yeah, next big thing was our Argentina trip, which we've just got home from. We were in Argentina for just over 3 weeks in Bariloche and Buenos Aires. We'll talk quite a bit more about it on the podcast. What are your kind of like early reflections from the trip to Argentina?
Yeah, so we started planning this trip before we went to Canada. Yeah, we must have booked it. And I think after we had like booked our trip to Canada, I'm not sure that we had thought that we would do another big trip. Because at that point, it was like we'd been out of the country, out of Mexico for 3.5 months. And so, financially, we were like, we're not sure if this makes sense to do this. And, does it make sense in general? Do we want to do it? If so, where would we go? Et cetera, et cetera. But we had a lot of friends go to Argentina last year and just talk about how with like the insane inflation they have with their dollar right now, it's like, very economic if you can come in with US dollars. And we just watched friends enjoy a country that we really loved on that backpacking trip that we took back in 2014 and kind of thought, you know what, we could save this for 2024, but if we go after Lou turns 2, it's going to cost us, significantly more to do so because we're going to have to pay for like a airline seat for her. And so we just decided, we went back and forth. I think this was the trip we kind of like pondered the most, I guess. And we kind of decided what we wanted was like the experience of, great air quality, clean water, beautiful nature, being outside, which we got in Canada, but without like the family and friend obligations, which maybe sounds bad. We love our family and friends, but it's like we wanted to just have the freedom to just explore and have the priorities be about the nature and stuff like that, rather than about being home to see grandparents and family and friends that we only get to see, once or twice a year. And so, yeah, we ended up booking it. We decided to go in the beginning of spring, a little bit of shoulder season. And let's maybe talk about what that was like.
Yeah, I think we'll probably talk in more detail on the episode, but I guess we made a bit of a weather gamble where we were like, hey, spring's supposed to be pretty nice, and just kind of looked at averages and didn't really like talk to people, although talking to people might not have helped because it seems like we got hit with like an unseasonably bad November. But yeah, weather was just cold, windy, snowy, and just seemed to be like really unseasonably cold for that time of year. Apparently it's normally quite windy and it's a change of season month, and it's like the mountains right by the Andes. So living in Canada for a number of years, we kind of know what that's like. There's a randomness to it. And I think for us, maybe the takeaway from me from that is, one, going somewhere during shoulder season is like cool, but if you're going somewhere like a mountain trip in shoulder season, like you're kind of making a gamble. And so having, I don't know whether it's a backup plan or also just like thinking that through a little bit more, like what if it's really cold?
What are the lowest lows? What's the worst weather that could happen in this shoulder season?
Like what's the worst month they've ever had in this month?
It might have been 2023.
Like, prepared to deal with that. But I still don't really regret it. I think for me, the things I was like, great food, time with friends, and time in nature. We did get some time in nature.
Good family time.
I think the food was like a 10 out of 10. The friend time was really great. The nature time, like still got to see some really beautiful stuff. I think us being sick was kind of the double whammy, where if we felt perfectly healthy, I don't think the weather would have gotten to us as much, especially in the first like week.
Yeah, so I guess we haven't done an episode, so they don't really have context for this. We basically arrived in Argentina and I got sick like the next day. I guess I said at the beginning that we had colds, and then you got it like 3 days after me, and then Lou got it like a week after. And mine basically, I was pretty much sick the entire time we were in Argentina. Like not super sick, but I had kind of like a nagging cough and like nasal drip the entire time. Lou was kind of coughing for a good portion of it. Even you had like a lingering cough. So I feel like we just got hit with like a terrible fall cold virus, some bad weather, and just those combined made it challenging. But I would agree with you. I don't regret it either. I think we still had a really good time. Like Bariloche is beautiful. And we'd booked an Airbnb right on the lake. We had beautiful views. So like even when it was freezing and windy and we weren't able to go outside in maybe the way that we had wanted to or hoped for, we were still able to like enjoy the space. And I feel like we did a lot of cool stuff considering the circumstances, which I think we'll share more about when we do our actual Bariloche episode.
Yeah, and I think it was a really unique time to be there. Hopefully things in Argentina will start to improve, and the part of like the equation as a traveler, it's like, oh, we can go to this place and things are really affordable, is because like salaries have been like depressed so far there. So hopefully things will kind of change and normalize there, which will make it slightly less cheap for international travelers, but a lot better for the Argentinian people. And it's a place I think I want to get back to and spend more time. And so we spent the majority of our time in Bariloche, but then we spent American Thanksgiving in Buenos Aires. So we got 4 days there, which was really great. I think one, it was just like beautiful, warm,
the weather
sunny.
was way, way better. We were like unthawing ourselves there, which was so nice.
And yeah, I got a taste of the city. I think we're both realizing, like, now that we're traveling as a family, we like being in cities. Like, love going to Mexico City, but like for a couple of days. And then getting out of there. Similar vibes with Buenos Aires, where it's like big, chaotic, crazy, tons of cool stuff, walkable But when you're on the street, you're kind of feeling a little bit anxious just because there's so much cars, traffic, noise, people, and you're trying to like push around a stroller.
Or like hold on to a toddler's hand because she refuses to go in her stroller, which we experienced quite a bit in Buenos Aires. And that's like, I love BA, and I was a bit anxious about going there with Lou just because I wasn't sure how things were with like the economy and stuff like that. But it was actually like pretty great being there. Very clean, everything seems very organized. I think it's, maybe even nicer than Mexico City in a lot of ways, but it has a lot of similarities to Mexico City. But, we have a feisty almost 2-year-old who wanted to take the city on her own. And it's just like stressful because she doesn't understand that like, hey, we got to stop at the crosswalk and we got to wait and we got to look both directions. And of course she needs to learn that, but it is an extra like stressor for us. I feel like being in a little town like Bariloche feels a little more family friendly in this chapter of life than BA. But I'm so glad that we did go. It was really fun to catch up with friends, and Thanksgiving was fun. It was fun to be back after so many years. We stayed really close to where we did back in 2014. So I feel like I would like when we go back to Argentina, it's not like if, it's when, because I know we're both keen to get back there and spend more time in some other cities. Maybe do Bariloche in the summer so we can hike a bit more. But yeah, I would love to go back to BA and just continue to explore that city too.
Yeah, I think it definitely sparked something in me of wanting to explore more of that part of the world. Like we had such a good time traveling around Patagonia and Chile and Argentina. It's been like 9 years now. And so it feels like a place I'd love to spend time, especially with kids, for the natural part of it. So really excited to get back. We flew BA, Santiago, Mexico City, Querétaro, which was a very long travel day to get home. But yeah, settled in here for the rest of the year. Really happy to be back. This year we did get around Mexico a little bit. Do you want to talk about the places we visited in Mexico?
Yeah, so we talked about PV and we talked about San Miguel already, but a couple of new places that we hadn't been before was Tolantengo, which is in the state of Hidalgo. You guys, if you follow like any Instagram accounts that kind of post about like kind of off the beaten path things to do in Mexico, may have seen these. They're like these beautiful, built in the side of a mountain, like warm, I guess, hot pools, like aguas calientes, hot springs. Everything is like very cream colored, these round pools, and they've got these beautiful like aquamarine pools. And so we've wanted to go for a while. It's about 3 hours from where we live, but we'd heard it was insane on weekends. And so one of the perks about you having American holidays off, since you're primarily working with an American-based company, is that we can take vacations or holidays on days that Mexicans don't have them off. So we actually went for Memorial Day, I think it was. And it was so fun because we got there, we had one of the pools all to ourselves, which was perfect because Lou could splash around and play. And we just, headed off like early in the morning and then got there, spent a couple of hours exploring there. And then we went back in the had, some food and went back home in the afternoon. So I feel like while a long day of travel, fortunately, we have a child that travels really well in her car seat. She was able to sleep a little bit. And I feel like it was like a really fun, use of like a long weekend day.
Yeah. And I think we're definitely getting more comfortable traveling around Mexico. So like those little trips, I think are really enjoyable. I think too, I don't know if it's going to get like better or worse as Lou gets a little bit older. Is she going to become more impatient? But she's also more able to engage with stuff in the car. So it'll be interesting to see if she is like a better or worse road tripper over the next year.
Yeah, fingers crossed that she either stays the same or gets better, but she's great. So I'd be happy if she just stayed the same. But I mean, she's getting bigger, she's getting more active, so who knows? But we definitely took advantage of road trips this year. The other place we went was Xilitla. It's spelled with an X. So kind of looks like, I don't know, Xilitla or Ixalita, but I think it's pronounced Xilitla. And that is about 5.5 hours from where we live. So we actually went for the July 4th long weekend. We left on a Saturday to do the drive. We stopped partway through to do a hike, which was a really nice way to kind of break up that long drive, especially with Lou. And then we spent all day Saturday, And then Sunday we came home so that we had the Monday, or we came back on the Monday and had the Tuesday off, something like that. We were there for a couple of nights. And the main reason that we went there is because they have a kind of semi-famous, pretty famous if you're in Mexico, surrealist garden. It is super, super cool, super beautiful. And so that was kind of the main highlight there. It's also just set in this like very green, lush valley. There's lots of waterfalls and rivers and hiking around there that you can do. So that's also an attraction. But in terms of the town itself, like it's a cute little, they call them like magic towns here, pueblos mágicos. It's a beautiful place to go, but the surrealist garden is definitely like the top kind of attraction for people and the reason that we went.
Yeah, it's a cool place and also just like a nice drive from here. It's not too far, but you can stop along the way. There's some good hikes, and also Jalpan, where we've been before, is on the way. So cool city. Like you could definitely build it into a road trip with Querétaro. It's also part of one time we had a longer trip planned that was going to go up from there into San Luis Potosi, go to a bunch of waterfalls. That's still something we want to do, but need to figure out a time for. And then other than that, we did some stuff a little bit closer to home. We took a trip to Ajijic, which is just outside of Guadalajara, maybe not that close to home. And we went to Mineral de Pozos, which is a city in Guanajuato, quite close to Querétaro, about an hour away. People kind of talk about it like it's like San Miguel was like 40 years ago, in kind of a way of like they're projecting like it'll become something in the future. So it's a beautiful little small town, and then there's lots of cool stuff around.
Yeah, we went there and we went to a lavender farm, which was kind of a fun activity to do with Lou. Again, we went on a American holiday where you had work off, so there was literally nobody other than the people who worked at the farm there. And so we were able to get some like really great photos with the lavender, and Lou just like ran through the fields and had a good time. I feel like there's not like a ton to do out there. There's some like nice restaurants and stuff like that, but I'm curious to just see how it continues to develop and stuff as people, I guess, move out of the cities and into that area. But I feel like that was really nice. And then, like you said, we did a weekend in Ajijic. We actually visited our friends Jake and Michelle Champ and their kids. We saw them in Colombia, and then they were back in Mexico for a couple of months. And so we went out there and we had a really nice weekend with them. We were able to eat some great food. We actually went to like a goat farm, which was like a super fun activity with the kids. And we hadn't been to Ajijic since 2018, 2019.
I think 2018, right?
Yeah, maybe. And so it was really fun to just be out there again because it'd been so long. We hadn't been there since the last time we visited Jake and Michelle when their kids were in school there. So fun to be there. And then their kids are, well, 2 of their 3 kids are older, and then the other one is similar age to Lou. So it's fun to go somewhere where you've got built-in babysitters.
Definitely. Yeah. And so I think there's still lots of stuff we want to do in Mexico this year ahead. We'll talk a little bit more in a sec as we really look forward, but we have this goal to go to every state in Mexico, which is definitely going to require a little bit more intentionality going forward. And I think doing that San Luis Potosi trip is definitely on our radar still. Going to Veracruz and exploring some things there is on our radar. I think we were both feeling a bit like, oh, we could do a Mexico City trip sometime soon. So yeah, still lots of stuff we want to do and explore here in Mexico.
Yeah, for sure. And then so looking ahead to 2024, we don't have a lot planned so far. So we are going to be going on a family trip to Hawaii, leaving early in the new year. So again, escaping Querétaro coldness in January, which I'm super grateful for after having our last trip be pretty chilly and then come back to chilly season here. I'm really excited for some beach time, some family time. And then we also have a trip planned also with family to Cabo, which we've never been to. So looking forward to checking out Cabo. We're going to check off another Mexican state, which, like you said, is a goal of ours. And then we're in the process of planning the rest of 2024. Going to Japan again is on our radar. Not going to lie. Going back to Canada at some point is on our radar. And then, we just have to decide where else what we want to go and what we want to do. But I know that there'll be for sure some fun Mexico adventures because there's lots of stuff we want to do. Copper Canyon's pretty high on my list. We actually thought about doing that for American Thanksgiving this year, and then we went to Argentina. So, sorry, Copper Canyon, next time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I feel like there's like this kind of tension we're getting into now where it's like there's all these cool places that we've been to, but we've been to them long enough ago that it's like novel and fun to go back to them again. Argentina was definitely like that. Japan was definitely like that. I feel like this is kind of like us as people too. Like we'll go to like a restaurant we like over trying a new restaurant often. But the tension of like, do we try to like get out and like go to Eastern Europe, go to places we haven't been before? Or do we kind of go back to the well, like go back to Japan? Kind of need to figure that out in the next year.
Yeah, I think too, like Europe, I'm really keen to get to. There's so many places on my bucket list over there, especially Eastern Europe. I think that's one trip we had kind of planned for summer of 2020 that we haven't been able to recreate yet. But the time zone is not super ideal. Like you said, you have a really great, flexible sort of setup. And, Argentina is great because it's within a few hours. Anywhere kind of North, South America is really functional. Asia works pretty well, but Europe is like challenging. So we need to kind of figure out something with that. Again, first world problems over here, but we will definitely keep you guys updated on what is to come. In terms of the podcast, we'll have some new episodes out in the new year, starting with Argentina, and then hopefully some interesting guests. We didn't release as many podcast episodes as we normally do this year. I think I counted them and we only released about like 15 new episodes. But I think as you guys have probably been seeing, we're just releasing episodes, every other week as possible. And if it's not possible, then we just don't release episodes. So we will get some episodes out as we have good guests, as we have good travel adventures. And we just really appreciate you being along for the ride.
Yeah, and maybe before we go, we should do a couple highlights and lowlights. What would you say your food travel highlight from this year?
So I think one thing that comes to mind for me right away is just like the sushi in Japan. Like we ate some really, really good, like fresh tuna and some really good tuna belly. Like especially, I think our first day in Tokyo, we went to the market because Lou woke up so early because of jet lag. Went to the fish market and stood in line for some fresh tuna. And like, that is just like the bomb.com. I feel like that stands out for me. Like steak in Argentina was really good. We ate some really good food there, but I think I just love sushi so much. I would say just some of the fish we ate in Japan was just really, really good.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a couple competing. So steaks in Argentina, specifically Alto El Fuego, and then Carniceria in Buenos Aires. Those meals are amazing. I could just keep going back over and over. It wasn't the best sushi we had, but this Kura restaurant in Japan, which is kind of, you have an iPad, you just order it, zooms out on a belt, just like pigging out there, like as maybe our first couple days, second day, third day in Tokyo. Just like, oh, I'll have a miso, I'll have an udon, I'll have more sushi. And then also the Kobe beef meal in Kobe, I think.
That one was a competing one for me too, but I feel like the sushi is just like a big winner because I feel like we can get pretty good sushi here. We've got a couple good go-to places, but I feel like compared to Japan, it's just like so average.
Yeah. What about kind of best like travel experience?
So I really liked Guatape in Colombia. I felt like that was a really, really fun experience that we had. I loved the hotel that we stayed at. I loved being able to like walk up the mountain and see the views. It was super, super spectacular. I loved the snow monkey experience near Nagano. I felt like that was like a huge highlight to be able to like hike up and wait for them to come out. And then they just started rushing down, and seeing Lou's reaction was so fun. I feel like that was definitely a highlight experience for me. And then in Argentina, we did in Bariloche specifically, we went up a chairlift and we got these incredible views of Bariloche, and Bariloche's nature is just spectacular with all the lakes and the mountains. And it had actually just snowed the night before, which not a huge fan of that, but I will say snow on the tops of mountains just adds like an extra kind of magic to it. And I feel like it was just really, really beautiful. And that's like a memory that really stands out for me, is like, I just like really loved that moment. So I feel like those ones for me are kind of top of mind.
Yeah, I think for me that snow monkey, specifically like the moment when they're all running up and Lou's waving at them, and it's just super fun. One that I was trying to think about like other stuff. So in Japan, a lot of hotels, you can like rent a sauna room. I talked about this in one of our Japan episodes. And the first hotel we stayed at had these like beautiful sauna rooms. They're relatively affordable, and just like saunaing and jumping in the tub That experience was pretty awesome. I'm trying to think of what else would kind of be competing there. Like definitely
Maybe just eating steak in Argentina.
eating steak. I don't know if that counts as a travel experience. Taking the trains in Japan, I think was really cool. And then, yeah, I'd say like maybe road tripping around Mexico would be some of my top ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. What would you say like the one thing you're most excited about travel-wise in 2024 would be?
I'm excited to plan some travels because we don't have a lot on our radar so far. So I'm excited it's one of our plans for when we're off during the Christmas week is to sit down and just plan out the year a little bit. At this point, we often have a little bit more travels planned, but we've just come off of a big trip and I feel like we just have been getting back into routine. And so I'm just excited to see what we decide to do with the year. And we're not going to share now, but we've also got some like fun ideas for, in the future, like not 2024, but kind of 2025 and beyond. And I'm really excited to kind of see what we decide to do with that.
Yeah. I think for me, that would be the case as well. It's like we've kind of gone through like an evolution as one, like the whole pandemic situation happening, two, starting to like family travel. And I feel like this year was kind of like, I don't know, imagine like you let like a chicken out of the hen house or something. It's like running around all over the place. We're like Colombia, Argentina, Canada, we're going everywhere, want to do everything. And I think maybe kind of the equivalent for this stage of life would be like we were in Asia 2016, 2017, like let's do it all. And now we're starting to think about like, okay, like now that we're traveling in this way, working, traveling as a family, like what are the things that are really going to be like really awesome experiences for us, for Louise and for our family. And I'm excited to kind of like design some of that for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. So definitely more to come with that. So stay tuned.
Awesome. As always, one of the big things from this year as well is just having so many people listening to the podcast, engaging with you guys. Really appreciate, the time you take out of your days to catch up with us. Really love connecting. So as always, send us a message on social media. Let us know what your big highlights from this year were for your own travels and what you're planning in the future. And if there's anything specific you'd love to hear on the podcast, guest-wise, definitely let us know as well. And hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas, beautiful New Year, and we'll see you all in 2024.
Yeah, happy holidays.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you want more, make sure to check out The World Wanders Insider, available on Patreon at patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
For show notes, head over to theworldwanderers.com. Find us on social media at The World Wanderers Podcast and join the private Facebook community at World Wanderers, a community for travelers.
You can always get in touch with us at info@theworldwanderers.com. And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us find new listeners.
See you next time.